So cultural deviance theory is, it kind of takes elements of social disorganization and strain and puts them together. So you have the effects of economic deprivation and lack of resources in general, plus social isolation in deteriorated neighborhoods. So that basically causes strain. So by having little resources and by feeling like you don't have a support system in your neighborhood, that causes certain kind of strain. And so rather than be constantly strained and constantly feeling frustrated with society and with your life and with your lot in life, basically this cultural deviance theory says that certain people who are experiencing this, they develop their own culture. They develop a lower class culture. They create their own norms and their own value systems that are at odds, usually, with larger society. So this creates this culture conflict because you have the rules in the criminal law will clash with these new group norms that they've created in this lower class culture. And so a lot of the values, the value system changes. It's not about economic wealth. It's not about like what car you drive or what your job is or how powerful you are. It's the values are changed to make it so that they're attainable goals. So values like trouble, like getting into trouble, can confer prestige in these lower class cultures. So you can show that you can handle yourself in tough situations. That's a valuable trait. Toughness is another one. This is showing that you're physically and emotionally tough. So you don't want to be seen as weak. Weakness is a very bad thing. So being tough is a very good thing. Smartness is another one that's interesting because it's not about intellect. You don't want to be seen as nerdy or brainy or anything like that, but it's about being streetwise and savvy. So book smart's not good, but knowing how to survive and thrive in a less than good neighborhood, that's a good thing. So people do things like they're really good at gambling or conning. They can outsmart the cops, things like that. That's the kind of street smarts that confers a lot of prestige in this lower class culture. Excitement is another interesting one because if you have this otherwise drab existence if you didn't have people that could make it exciting. So the people that make it so that you can do something fun and it's exciting, they're gonna have a lot of social prestige. So these are things like you're good at gambling and fighting and drinking and sex, and the more of those things you can have, the better your existence, the more excitement you have. That's a positive thing. That's a really good a way to succeed. Fate is another one, another value where people in this lower class culture, they'll believe that their lives are in the hands of some spiritual force. So things like karma is really important. So getting lucky, especially for things like gambling or getting away from the cops, that's seen as really good things. So, somebody's looking out for you. Somebody's on your side. That's important. And so that's if fate is on your side, that shows that you're a really valuable person. And then autonomy is another value. And so this is the idea that you have to be independent from authority figures. So from police, teachers, parents, anybody who could have some kind of impact on you. You are autonomous. You are your own person. You must always maintain control. So saying like, I'm my own man or whatever, that autonomy is also really important. So these are the kinds of value systems that even people in really lower class areas with little to no resources, they can still succeed in these things. And so they create these value systems so that they can have a way to be successful, even if they can't be successful by, typical social standards. So delinquent subcultures is sort of one way of looking at these subcultures. And Albert Cohen talked about specifically these delinquent subcultures. And this is not the same Cohen as Cohen and Felsen from Routine Activities Theory. That is Lawrence Cohen. So status frustration is what Albert Cohen talked about. And he said this was very similar to strain, where you have the social conditions are making people incapable of achieving success in a legitimate way. So it's because of a certain status, you just can't be successful. So another thing that sort of ties into that is that if you are being measured based on things like middle class measuring rods. So things that are used for everybody, you can't possibly meet those standards. So you have kids in school that are taking the same SAT tests or any other standardized tests that, the middle class and the upper class are taking, but of course they had more opportunities to engage with, various different educational leaders and role models and things like that. And they had more resources so they could buy like the fancy books and programs and whatever. And they had people who cared about them and who'd sit and take the time and had the time to sit with them. So you can't measure those groups with the same measuring rods and expect everybody to be able to succeed. You just can't. So people in the lower class then can't possibly meet these standards if you're being basically compared to people in the middle and upper class. And so then that negatively affects their life, because at school, if you fail at school, then that's going to affect job prospects, which then is going to affect your likelihood and ability to make money in the future. It's also a consideration in juvenile courts. So for things like sentencing and diversion programs, if you're a good student and you're good at school, they're going to be more lenient with you. And that's how the criminal justice system works. So not only are we saying you're more likely to fail out because we're measuring you based on, all the same measurements of all these other kids that have all these resources that you don't have, but then we're also going to be more likely to put you in a juvenile detention facility or to give you a longer sentence because you're not doing well in that thing that we shouldn't do well in. And then even other criminal justice system decisions, like things like release decisions, and that happen after the fact. If you go back in somebody's history and, they failed out, they're dropped out or they failed out, then that's and it's going to work against them for other criminal justice system decisions. And then you have that permanent record or file that's going to follow you for life. So then it all kind of starts early and it just affects you for your entire life. So then these people then create these deviant subcultures. It's this reaction to rejection by that middle class and by those middle class decision makers. And so Cohen specifically talked about 3 different types of deviant subcultures. And so these were all boys that he was looking at. But so he talked about the corner boy, the college boy, and the delinquent boy. So the corner boy, these are boys that engage in things like truancy, promiscuity, drug use. They retreat into the comfort of the lower class neighborhood. So they kind of just like, well, I'm in this, I guess I'm just going to go with it. So that's the corner boy. The college boy these are the ones that strive to be successful by middle class standards. So it's often a losing battle because they're not equipped socially, academically, or linguistically to succeed, but they're just like fighting that uphill battle. And they're like, I'm going to succeed. And sometimes they do, but it's a constantly an uphill battle. And then Cohen talked about the delinquent boy. And the delinquent boy, these are just where the norms and values are in direct opposition to the middle class. So not only do they not align, they are directly in opposition to the middle class. So these are the boys that are going to exhibit hostility because they're angry at the system, and they're going to be impulsive. They're going to be living for today. They're going to engage in risky and law-violating behavior. And so they're often going to join gangs. So the delinquent boy, then, these are the ones that are going to be most problematic for the criminal justice system. And so there are different ways that people in the lower class can kind of deal with their situation. And so delinquent boys, these are the worst cases then. And sort of it leads into the idea of gang subcultures, because this is one way that subcultures will form, is that if you can succeed in a gang, then that's a different way to succeed, and that you don't have to succeed by middle class standards. So gang formation then typically it's the combination of social disorganization and status frustration or strain, because you have these social institutions are either frayed at best or they're totally absent. And so the youth that are violating the laws, they sort of get together and they form these groups, and then the gangs form. So because you don't have the positive social institutions, then gangs kind of fill that gap. And essentially there is nothing there to stop gangs from forming, and nobody's telling them that this is not a good idea, or, there's better ways to work towards your goals. And so there's a kind of, everything falls to what the gang tells them to do, and they're like, okay, well, this is the only thing I'm being told. And so kids often join gangs because they're looking for acceptance and respect, and they're not getting that anywhere else. So this is overwhelmingly most prevalent amongst lower class males in particular. And the behavior of people in these situations it's short-term hedonism. It's about, you can't delay gratification, so it's what I want now, and I'm going to do whatever I can to get it. So it causes a lot of societal pain. Crime comes from this, of course, and it's what we call non-utilitarian in the sense that they don't care about anyone else's happiness. So they're malicious, they're negativistic behavior. It's basically things, whatever they can do for themselves, and this is very common amongst these gang subcultures. And then differential opportunity is another one that kind of ties in with cultural theories in general. And so this was Cloud and Olin, so they talked about differential opportunities. And this is the idea that people in all strata have similar goals, so we're all working towards the same things, but the lower class has a limited means of obtaining them. So both conventional and criminal opportunities are limited for the truly disadvantaged as well. So you have some neighborhoods with very high social disorganization, and they're not even stable enough to support professional criminals or drug traffickers or organized crime groups, which is where the real money is within the criminal lifestyle. So the truly disadvantaged can't even get those opportunities. So even within disadvantaged strata, there's different levels and stratification there. So Cloud and Nolan talked about 3 types of gangs then. So they talked about the criminal gangs. These were kind of the best ones you could get into if you're going to join a gang. And so these are more stable areas. They're still lower class areas with high levels of social disorganization, but relative to other low class areas, they're more stable. Learning is provided within the context of the gang by the older, experienced offenders. It's kind of a training ground for a successful criminal career. Then you have the conflict gangs, which these are gangs in that truly disadvantaged kind of communities. There's transient residents. So the crime itself is disorganized, it's individualistic, so it's not for the good of the gang, it's for the good of the person. There's no criminal role models, and it's mostly using personal violence and property violence to gain status. Whereas in the criminal gangs, you gain status by helping the gang. And then the retreatist gangs, these are just like what they sound like. They're detached. They retreat from society. They may have tried crime, but they're too clumsy, weak, or scared to be accepted into either a criminal gang or even a violent gang. They use drugs and alcohol and sex to retreat from society. And they may do things like pimp, or they're going to con people, sell drugs, commit petty crimes to feed their habits. And they generally just gain status through peer approval. So they basically just try to get people to like them, and it works or it doesn't. So those are the different types of our cultural deviance theories.